Hi, this is Melanie Jutras, and I just wanted to provide a quick visual overview in case some people are needing a little bit extra instruction for the first lab that's due this week, since we haven't really gotten into the R programming just yet. I thought this might be helpful. So if you go to your course menu and you look at the learning modules, we are in Module 4, and I just want to point out that there are some extra reading and resources here that will help you aside from just trying to dive into doing the lab assignment. So I know the lab assignment is the thing that's graded, but there's always resources here that really will be helpful. It might not be listed as a required reading, but if you try to just jump in to do the lab and you haven't read these things, you might struggle a little bit. So I just want to point that out. This first one in particular goes hand in hand with what you'll be doing in the lab. The second one is a website that has really good tutorials and really shows how to use R with basic statistics, and so that's a helpful resource. And finally, there's a PDF with basic statistics review. Optional, but particularly useful for those of you who have not had statistics for a while. Just to understand some of these concepts, there will be a few questions throughout the lab where you have to answer some questions about statistics, and if you don't recall those concepts, it's a good idea to get yourself a statistics review, and I'm happy to provide more resources if you're struggling. So when you look at the learning modules in the course menu, aside from each module being listed on the left, we also have down at the bottom the virtual lab access, which everyone tried out in Module 1, but I pointed it out here because it's been a few weeks. This is how we access the virtual machine. So you click on Virtual Lab Access, and it loads. And some people have said that it doesn't always look like this when it loads. So if you don't see the statistics app here, you can go over here to the App Store and click on that, and it should bring you to this point. So once you see this, you launch that, and basically that is logging you into the virtual machine. So this is a great way for us to not have to have students download all the software and make sure they have all the right versions and all of that. This virtual machine provides all that for you. And it can be a little confusing. I just want to point out, you do have a start menu, and you do have a different file explorer and browser, different icons down here at the bottom that have to do just with this virtual machine, not your local machine. So don't get confused if you're trying to use a browser in your environment, or a file explorer, I guess is a better example. You may be accidentally clicking on the one on your local machine when you really wanted to look at the file explorer for your virtual machine. If you find it confusing to tell the difference between the two, you can use this maximize icon over here just to really know that you're definitely in the virtual machine, and then you can just escape out of that when you're done. So we have multiple apps here available and programs, but the ones that we will be using mainly for this course include the R GUI and the RStudio Integrated Development Environment. The lab document itself initially instructs the use of this R GUI, and that's fine. I just find that the RStudio environment is a little more helpful, especially if you aren't really familiar with programming, or if you haven't done much programming. So one of the initial things in the lab it tells you to do is ls or help. You can see that help loads a separate window that then has the R documentation in it. And then it definitely gets you started at that point then with just showing you how you can do our demos to learn some things. If you click demo, it pulls up, this is kind of like the help page for demo, because you didn't give it any information about what you wanted to demo. So now it's showing you, oh, you could demo graphics or you could demo image. I'm going to go ahead and close all of this because although you can do the labs in the RGUI like that, I think that I would rather demonstrate how to do it in RStudio. So if you click on the RStudio icon, you get the same kind of thing. You get an environment where you can run R scripts, programs, but you get a little extra because not only do you have the console, but you have information about variables that you've loaded. You have a help window over here where you can get help. You have an area where you can see the plots that if you've plotted anything in your code. So I'd really like to demonstrate in this. And what I'm going to do is just look at the lab document, which you have as an assignment for this week. So I'm going to pull that up and just show you a couple of things. So as I showed you before, it did instruct you to just start off with some basic exploration of the environment, and part of that was doing an LS. This is the lab. I don't know if I can get all of this. Visible. It's going to be a little tricky. I think you can maybe follow along with your you can follow along. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to do this in this window, but this is basically the lab and the instructions on what you want to be doing. So I'll be referring to that, but I'm not going to show it on the screen because I think it's just getting in the way. So as I mentioned, one of the first things it tells you to do is just list what's in your environment. And this is, I just did this in the RGUI earlier, but in that environment we just had something called console. Here we have a lot of different things going on. And I'll see why that, I'll show you why that's helpful in just a minute, because in your lab it first tells you to open the script. And this is the part where some students get confused because you saved it 3 weeks ago and you might not remember where you saved it. So if you do a file, open file, now if you're in the RGUI, it'll be file, open script, but that's the same thing. It's a regular Windows browser, but you have to remember where you put your files. So in my environment, I put my files on my desktop. So that's where mine are, but hopefully you all kind of follow those instructions and put them on your desktop as well, and you'll be able to find them. So you can see I just navigated to the module 4. And the first step of our lab instructs us to open this module 4 lab1.r. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you can see you should all get to the point where you can see that same thing. And the thing that's really useful about this is that basically all the code has been written for you. So once you open this file, you have these little snippets of code that are all written for you. So all you have to do is is run them and execute them. So that's a big help. And then also there are instructions in the lab that show, like, as we can type in the console ls down here. But another thing that you can do, I'm just going to clean this so you'll see it's clean. So now nothing is showing. But if you go up to your script, this is your R program, and you put your cursor on that line, ls, with the parentheses, and then you say run, it will run it, and it will put the output in the console. So I'm going to say run, and it runs that. So, and then, so see this set working directory? If I run this, this is not going to work, because d/user/xx user xx doesn't exist. But I'll show it just because this might happen to you if you type the wrong thing in. So if you say run, it says error in set working directory, d blah blah blah, cannot change working directory. It can't change it because that doesn't exist. So in my virtual environment, I'm going to click on this File Explorer and show you this desktop and navigate to where mine is. So this is where the other thing to note is these slashes go the opposite way. So when I copied and pasted from my File Explorer, I have these slashes going one way, but they're really not going that way. They're going this way. So I have to fix all those slashes because that's how you access. That's how you indicate the file path in R. So what I'm doing here is I changed what was in quotes because it was just a generic thing to set the working directory. And you can put your cursor anywhere on the line, it doesn't matter. But as long as you're on that line and then you say run, it will run that line. So it did, and it set my working directory to that location. And then I can do down here, if I want to do a get working directory just to see what's my working directory, it shows me what it's looking at, what it's pointing to. So it looks like it's all set. And then I will point out again here, see this environment up here in the upper right, it says environment is empty because I don't have any variables or anything defined. But now this next line of the script says lab1 gets read.table, quote, lab1_01.txt. And that lab1_01.txt is a file that exists at this location where you just told it to set your working directory. So hopefully, if we try to set lab1 to that, it will read that file and it will insert the contents into a variable lab1 that we can work with. So I'm going to put my cursor here and I will say run. And yes, it worked. You can see it worked down here. It executed the line and it didn't say that there was any kind of error. And you can also see in the upper right, we now have something in our environment. We have something called lab1, which is 120,530 observations of 3 variables. And we can actually click on this arrow to see more detail about that. So that's why I like this RStudio integrated development environment. It just, I think, ties it all together nicely, and it's helpful to see that information. And then the same thing here, we put a cursor here and we run this line of code and we see what happens. So basically the lab document, when you do your lab, will guide you to do all of these things. Sometimes it'll talk about in that first part where we were setting our working directory, it might say M:, or it might not be the exact path. You need to go to the path where your files are and put that in the quotes. And then remember, like I said about the slashes, they'll be going in the opposite direction if you just copy and paste that from your File Explorer. So the lab, document really walks you through and explains things, and that should be enough information to get you started. Again, all the code is written for you. You don't have to write the code, but this is a great way to get you started with R, and then you can go ahead and write your own scripts and do analysis of your own data, especially as we get further into the term project, when you want to be analyzing those CSV files and really doing statistical methods on them. We're not doing statistical methods per se, or nothing very complicated this week. We're just doing really the basics, but this is a great lab to get you started. I encourage you to explore and even go beyond what we're doing for the homework, just to make sure you're comfortable with this. If you have questions, please feel free to post in the general questions discussion board. Often fellow students can help and might see the post within minutes, whereas it might take me several hours before I see your post and respond to it. But I always do try to get back as quick as I can, because I know you're trying to work on you're encountering problems as you're trying to work on things. Okay, well, I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to working with all of you on learning a lot of this R programming and seeing what you can do with it for your analysis. Thank you.